praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Because of His blessings, we can come here in healthy condition to attend this event. Secondly, let us greet and pray to our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who had brought us from the darkness into the lightness. Ladies and gentlemen, on this next occasion, I am Sita Dian, as the Master of Ceremony, would like to read the agenda of the event today. First, opening. Second, welcoming speech. Third, the public lecture. Fourth, question and answer. And closing speech. And the last is closing. Well, the first agenda is opening. Let's open this event by reciting Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The second agenda is welcoming speech by the Dean of Faculty of Adat and Cultural Sciences, Dr. Muhammad Wildan M. Hum. For Mr. Muhammad Wildan, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Master of Ceremony for the time. First of all, I would like to congratulate for the English department for the event today. This is such a wonderful and great event for the students to give them more opportunity to explore more on the benefit and advantage of English. First of all, I would like to let us pray to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, who has given us in a healthy condition, so we can do our best to improve our knowledge during this COVID time. I think this is a good opportunity for us during COVID time to improve our knowledge, especially concerning to our own department in this occasion, that is English. As we know that English is how to say, English is sometimes we could say English is easy, but we know that we are as Indonesian, we have difficulties in speaking, in general, in mastering English. So this is really a good opportunity for students to explore more on the many other aspects of expertise, or how to say, expertise. I think expertise especially for the kids to study English, as we maybe already knew that we have sometimes some difficulties in learning English. We have in universities, for example, we have also some lecturers who have master in maybe in reading English books, but they still have difficulties in speaking or maybe writing. One thing that we may underline here, that English has been perceived by many Indonesian as a difficult subject. that's that's is a mistake, a mistaken understanding or misleading for us, for those who know well about English, who have studied English, because maybe we have we could speak in English maybe quite easily, at least understandable among us, but this could be a good breakthrough, I think. The Department of English uh, organize such kind of event to explore that English could be a fun. So that I don't know. I think that's what the one of the advantage or the benefit of this lecture about uh, children's literature. Um, yeah, in while in Indonesia, I think we have quite difficulties to find children literature. This is also a good opportunity for the student to explore more on the study of this, or even or maybe to could also good opportunity to be the how to say to write, to be the author of such a children literature. So the point is that children literature in English could be a fun. One thing that is significant, I think, could be a fun, and 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 this is also a light subject for the children, so that English could be easily understand. But from the perspective of literature, I think this is also good to know that uh, learning English is not only about the language itself, but learning also about the culture. If we learn about the culture, so it would lead us, or would ease us to study about the language, because the culture is the whole process of the knowledge production. So that's basically the about children literature, the advantage or the benefit of studying of it, also how to develop children literature. Um, there are a lot of possibilities for the student, whether a student could study and learn deeply about children literature from academic perspective, uh, but we can also see that this is also a good opportunity for a student of English department to uh, to develop uh, the material of children literature by adapting, for example, uh, in many different, I mean, adapting and adapting local values into English. That could be also a good opportunity. So there are a lot of opportunities for the students of English department whether this could be more on academic perspective, or could be also from the cultural perspective. So I do hope that such kind of event, online or webinar event could be developed further by the Department of English, so that the student could um, see there are many aspects of English that could be learned, could be developed. Therefore, I always urge to the Department of English, especially Ibu Uliati Nosari, to develop further about this such kind of this event for the students. So again, congratulate for the event. Hopefully that that the student could take the benefit of the event. And finally, I would like to say thank you for the speaker today, Pak Ida Fajar. Ya, ya. Terima kasih, Mas, for your availability, and hopefully it could enlighten students about the many aspects of children literature for their study or for their career in the future. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful webinar today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for Mr. Muhammad Wildan for the welcoming speech. The next agenda is welcoming speech by the head of English Department, Mrs. Uliati Ratnasari, SSM Home. For Mrs. Uliati Ratnasari, the time is yours.
Thank you, Miss Sita. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Wildan. The Honorable Bapak Ida Fajar Priyanto as today's speaker, Dean of Adab and Cultural Sciences UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Dr. Muhammad Wildan, MA, Dr. Ubaidillah as the Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, Ibu Febri as the Secretary of English Department, Dr. Daniel Hidayatullah as the Chief of Committee, the committee team, namely Dr. Arif Budiman, Ibu Aninda Adisiwi, Miss Amartya, Ai, Sita, and Diva, all lecturers of English Department of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, namely Pak Fuad and Pak Bams in Australia, Pak Margo, Bu Witri, Ibu Harsiwi, and all participants that I cannot mention one by one. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahirabbil alamin, assalatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain amma ba'du. On these occasions, first of all, I would like to thank to the committee and all lecturers of English department. Without all of you, this public lecture cannot be conducted well. Secondly, please allow me to highly respect to all of the participants for all spirits and efforts that you contribute to this lecture. I hope this lecture can broaden our knowledge and trigger us to this lecture, to learn more and by applying in academic activities, including research in relation to children's literature and integration and interconnections of our campus holds. Thank you very much once again. I'm not going to deliver a long speech. Pak Ida is going to deliver long lectures for today. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mrs. Uliati Ratnasari, for the welcoming speech. Now, we are going to have a public lecture by Mr. Ida Fajar Priyanto, Ph.D., which will be moderated by Mrs. Diva Hana. To Honorable Ms. Diva Hana, the time is yours.
Okay, so Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Diva Hana, the moderator of today's public lecture. I'm very pleased to see all of you here and welcome to all the participants that joined this public lecture. This public lecture is conducted by English Department of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta, and it will be discussed about children's literature. So, for today's speaker is Mr. Ida Fajar Priyanto, Ph.D. And before we go to the presentation, I will read some of his CV. He is a lecturer from Gajah Mada University and he teaches in Information and Library Management and also in Master Program of Higher Education Management. He also works as comic reviewer and consultant for Britannia Incorporation, and also he was a former director of Gajah Mada University Libraries. Mr. Ida Fajar Priyanto graduated from University of North Texas for his PhD and from Loughborough University of Technology for his Master of Arts in Information Studies. He also gets some awards. For example, in 2014, he gets Digital Creation Award and also Fraser McConnell Award on Education in USA. In 2012 until 2015, he gets a Fulbright Scholarship Presidential Award. Okay, so before we start our presentation, I would like to tell you if you have any question and answer, if you have any question, you can write it down on the chat room, and also please mute your microphone. So for Mr. Ida Priyanto Fajar, the time is yours.
Right, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Wildan, who has been, I think, the dean of this faculty, and also Uli, who challenged me to talk about children's literature that I studied long time ago, a really long time ago. Although now I'm working for reviewing the comics in the United States, but studying children's literature has been about 29 years ago. It's been a long time ago, but I stay young. No, don't worry. If you are still undergrad students, no problem, because I'm also still learning, but learning about life. At the moment, I bring some books like this. This is Toy Story. So I also have several books, the old books. Also Winnie the Pooh. So these are some of the books I still keep at home. So at home we have lots of books. If you want to study children's books, you can come to my home. My home is welcomes anyone to read English books, because at home we have mostly English books and few Indonesians, because my sons also read English most of the time. I have two sons. The first is now teaching archive at Gajah Mada, and the other is now assistant lecturer in geography. Well, talking about children books and children's literature, I will talk maybe not as long as an hour, maybe less than that, because my knowledge is very little. So I will speak to try to dig out what I have learned before. Hope you can understand what I'm speaking. I speak slowly this one. Try to speak slowly as possible, so that everyone can learn. And sometimes I speak Bahasa Indonesia and sometimes Japanese, but I forgot my Arabic because I studied Arabic so long time ago, maybe 40 years ago. It's been a very long time. I travel as well, travel a lot to 5 continents already. So this is a good experience. So if you have a chance to come to my home and share ideas, that's also welcome. Uli sometimes come to my home and share ideas and share laughing together. So that's what we do. most of the time. But let me start with my screen. I will have not so many screens. I mean, not so many slides to share with you. But let me share 27. Oh, sorry. Oh, this is wrong. Um, sorry, wrong slide. I think I have another slide, the new one. This is the one I want to show. Right. Okay. So hope you can you see this picture? Can you see the slide?
Not
Fully?
yet, Masida.
Not yet.
I haven't seen your slide. Yes.
Okay. Wait a minute. Um. Oh yeah. Okay. Wait a minute. Sorry. Sometimes it's been
That's
confusing.
okay.
Okay. I got it. I got it. Yes. You got it. Yeah. Right. Can you see the slides?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
sure.
Yes.
Right. This is just some pictures.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Some pictures of me. I'm still young. You know. Now I'm still young and younger and younger. Um, some of the pictures I had, but I have thousands, thousand pictures. I just want to show you some. I remember my personal experience. If you want to stay young, you should learn from me. First is because I happened to be in London at the time, and then I was a master's student. And at the time, I wanted to buy a book, a children's book. And what happened there? And then the seller said, "Oh, for you it's free. You know, for you it's free. Good boy." Oh, that's gosh. I found myself to be so young. Uh, the seller thought I was an elementary student, an elementary school student. So that was lucky for me to get free books. And sometimes I have, because I have friends, you know, like in Singapore. Sometimes when I go home, when I go there, friends usually give me books, and that is also good. Sometimes baggage of books I brought from Singapore the last time. Okay, now let's see. Do you know this? Some of these books. Anyone knows about these books? Which books do you know?
Yes.
Which one? Harry Potter. Do you read Harry Potter? J.K.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Back to the Future. That's a 1985 movie. Jungle Book.
Yes,
Win
sir.
in the Willow. Okay. Where the Wild Things Are was published in 1960 and was awarded. This is the one which was also good. I had one. I still have this book, but I didn't find last night, you know, to show you. But this one was a very good book, published in 1960, 62, 61, 62. Um, and also Hans Christian Andersen and so on. These are some of the modern fantasy, old fantasy books that I want to share with you to talk about later. But as Uli said, I call Uli because she's my sister, younger sister. Um, so this is when I'm going to talk about what's children's literature and widening children's literature, and then the third will be, this is the point we're going to talk about today, is modern fantasy. So we will define what is modern fantasy and types of modern fantasy, and then I will end with a summary of the talk. So that's what I'm going to talk today. So not so many things, because maybe I have forgotten some of the idea. Right. Now talking about children's literature, you cannot simply define as collection of books written for children, read by children, or written about children. That's too simple. You cannot define that. And but this is an idea, a suggestion When I studied in the United States recently, I studied a digital library, and what was interesting at the time was that I should analyze one website. It is called International Children's Digital Library, ICDL. If you go to this site, you will be able to get you will be able to read books from all over the world, and you can also submit the Indonesian books and then reviewed and then can be translated to into several languages. So although you read the Arabic children's literature, you can still read it in English. So International Children's Digital Library is the site, the website that you can go. Right. Uh, children's literature is actually an assortment of books and not books written for children and adults, read by children and adults, and written about children, but not necessarily. So that is interesting to note, not necessarily for children, but it's also for adults. So you have to understand this, that maybe in the beginning it was for adults and then children enjoy it. So they become the children's literature as well. Maybe children's the characters in the story are children's, but actually that was formally dedicated for adults as well. So children's literature is created for and read by children, adolescents, and adults. Children's literature is high art. Also the illustration and so on are very interesting. Extraordinary writing and then everything in between. So that is children's literature. So if you see English children's literature, they usually design very nice publications, usually have pictures, and then you have also design of 3D books and so on. So like Winnie the Pooh that I show you just now, Winnie the Pooh was designed as a 3D. Actually, that was 3D books. That's so that children enjoy reading the books. Um, but some written actually for adult. I think if you study English literature, you will find some. Like my dissertation last time was about Mark Twain. Mark Twain used children's characters as I mean in their in his novels and short stories. But actually, he wanted to show about life and in Mississippi, actually not dedicated for children, but it's enjoyed by children, so it becomes children's literature as well. That was my dissertation a long time ago. So children's literature is also a collection of books as old as the printing press, like Newbery. It was written by in 1744. A little pretty pocket book that was considered as the first of the early children's books. And then the new one is published online as in a sort of application, like the Pigeon run this application. Don't let the Pigeon run this application, published in 2011. Um, Children's literature also portray all aspects of humanity. So about caring others, how to take care of people, other people. But sometimes children's literature also discusses about inhumanity. For example, the life in the time of Hitler, when Hitler was in power in Germany. So this book was actually a bit sad story. And then children's literature also deals with non-humanity. So non-humanity means not human, but act like human. Next is some other books are very nice. So it's the span of children's library, children's literature dated back to 44 until 2020 or 20 publications. So the children's literature covers the whole world and explore the secret worlds of your imagination. So what you think, what you imagine can be realized in children's literature. It can be poetry as well. So you can find children's poetry or poetry for children, and then fiction, story for children's, story for adults about children, and so on. Non-fiction, argument, biography, even biography is children's literature. So the biography of anyone, for example, a biography of that is also children's literature. And sometimes in the form of picture books, sometimes pop-up books, paper books, digital text as well. So in various type of media the children's literature are published. In addition, it also that children's literature can be played, play drama, and also single story or many stories in the anthology, for example, and then happy stories, sad stories, scary stories, like where the wild things are. That is scary stories, if you read that, and then mad stories as well, and then not stories. Not stories mean uh, any engineering books, for example, for children. That is a not story, but that covers in children literature. So children's literature is created for and read by children, adolescents, and adults. Children's literature is high art and good writing usually, and also interesting. And please note as well that children's literature are not always in text, in the form of books. Sometimes it is changed or designed as a movie as well. So from books to movie sometimes, and then also from books to drama and so on. And even some from books, from text to picture. So that can happen in children's literature. So why learning children's literature? Um, First, for pleasure. It's interesting to read children's literature. I read children's literature until now, and we have collections of books. Not many books, but but for enjoyment. And it was good, when about 30 years ago, I still read the book, and I sometimes read the books for my sons, and they enjoy it. Sometimes I became storyteller. Well, if you are parents of, if you have kids, I think it's good for you to be a storyteller, because you will show how to develop language among children, and then also cognitive development. So you design, I call it design. You prepare your children to have a good behavior by showing or reading children's books to them, because children's literature also develop personality among children. And apart from that, I think children's literature also have cultural heritage, culture about either from our own culture or from foreign culture. So this will transmit literary heritage and cultural heritage. Also expanding imagination. This is good, especially the modern fantasy, in which you can out of the box. You can be out of the box instead of in the real world. So children's literature has been a new and interesting field that attract researchers. I think if Uli can design to have a subject, children's literature for English department, that would be a good idea. So in Faculty of Faculty of Adapt, you can have children's literature as a subject. This will be good for the students because they can study, enjoying the literature for children, also enjoying the how the books are designed, and then well, you can see the illustration, for example, also the way the conversation in the books. You can learn that as well. That was my that is my good. Right. Now come to the what you call the modern fantasy. Modern fantasy is one of the genre in the children's literature. We have old fantasy and new fantasy or modern fantasy. If you know Hans Christian Andersen, I think everyone may have read the books. I mean the stories written by Hans Christian Andersen. The characteristic of fairy tales is usually written as once upon a time. This to show that this is a story of some time ago in a foreign land, for example. It's also mentioned that way. Uh, Once upon a time in a foreign land, in a far, far land, for example. And then also, it is also the characteristic of the fairy tales is the hero or heroine usually have to face challenges, obstacles, barriers, and they have to overcome. They have to cope with obstacles, and then in the end, they are rewarded with a happy ending. So the ending is happy for them, and then also, well, let me see. Let me remind. If you have read Cinderella, for example, that is an example of a fairy story. Cinderella was very living in a poor condition, but in the end, she is very happy. That is an example of a heroine overcome obstacles and have a very happy ending. Um, Magical powers is another point to show in the fairy tales. So the characteristic of fairy tales is the time is not decided, and then also the hero heroine usually uh, have a good reward, and also characteristic as well. There's a good and weak elements. So good people, bad people are there, and very easily identifiable. So the good people will have a good reward, and then the weak will be punished. So that is what happened in old fantasy. So we can predict what will happen in the end. Next, the old fantasy sometimes is redesigned as a new one. So for example, the some of the old fairy tales are changed or produced as a movie, for example. So that also happens. That old fantasy and the new fantasy. So in the beginning, it was only a story, but then it becomes movie. Um, the basic elements you can see here, written by Dorothy DeWitt. Magic of smallness. So a very small people or persons meeting a giant, for example. There's a book entitled Gulliver's Travel. It was not dedicated for children actually, but it was actually dedicated for adults. But it's also enjoyed by young people, so it becomes the children's literature as well. Gulliver's Travels, if you have known that book, and Snow White is an example that it was formerly a fairy tales, but now Disney changed into movie. Um, Basic elements is magic of smallness. The very tiny person becomes uh, the hero in that story, Magic of Sleep, and then Magical Disguise. The Frog Prince is an example. The old fantasy was there are two persons, two important persons here. Perrault, the first children's books of fairy tales, and then Hans Christian Andersen, the first creator of fairy tales, literary fairy tales. So Hans Christian Andersen exactly wrote the fairy tales, while Charles Perrault he only collect the stories told by people, and then he wrote and published the children's books. So there are two different types. So Charles Perrault only collect the stories, the unknown origin of fairy tales, while Hans Christian Andersen was the first creator of fairy tales. And some of the stories written by Hans Christian Andersen are actually the stories of his life. The Ugly Duckling, for example, was an example of his experience when he lived in Europe after his father died. Okay. Science fiction sometimes is considered as modern fantasy, but some other experts consider science fiction as apart from modern fantasy. I still consider science fiction as part of the modern fantasy, but actually science fiction operate outside of the normal boundaries of the real world. It's in a place where it is unusual. It's about the future. It's more scientific actually, and involve wonders of technology. So if you see the stories that involve the technology, that is actually science fiction. And then fairy tales, usually shorter than most fantasy works. That's different between fairy tales, uh, the old fantasy and the new fantasy, the modern fantasy. Fairy tales are shorter, and then characters and setting usually lack of specificity in the old fantasy or fairy tales. Also, the names, once upon a time in a far, far land, that is a characteristic of fairy tales. But in the modern fantasy, usually you have the name of the place. For example, in the story of Batman, for example, Batman is considered also children sometimes, children's books. Gotham City, for example, is the place in Batman. Right. Next is fantasy is a fictitious work in which the characters, action, and setting are deliberately freed from reality. So you can see that the story in a modern fantasy can be um, far away from the real life, sometimes in a magical place. So that can happen. You can just go anywhere in the modern fantasy. You can free from the reality. And then high fantasy usually occurs in another world where physical and human laws doesn't exist. So that is the point that high fantasy in a place where physical and human laws, no physical laws, no human laws. And then low fantasy is usually in the real world, events and the magic sometimes have exist there. So low fantasy usually have the real world plus the magical instruments in the story. If you see Harry Potter, for example, Harry Potter is the real life and the magical side of the story. So you can see how Harry Potter can go anywhere, can meet the magical lives in the story. Also, the Hobbit, for example, and other books. the types of fantasy worlds. The fantasy, the modern fantasy, this children's books usually have three types of the settings. For example, it begins and ends in a fantasy world, not in the real life, not in the real world like where we live now. So, example is The Hobbit, for example, and The Wizard of Earthsea. Those are the stories where the beginning and the end are in a fantasy world. But sometimes you can start in the real world and move into the fantasy world, like Alice in Wonderland. This is a story beginning in the real world, like where we live, and then she goes to a far land, in a fantasy world. Peter Pan is another. Don't think Peter Pan is a singer in Indonesia. Peter Pan is, can sing a song, but in the children's literature, Peter Pan is a story of the modern fantasy. I think Uli prefers Peter Pan Indonesia in Indonesia because it has songs, right? Fantasy world also set in the real world, but the elements of magic intrude. So those are two examples of the story that has magics, but in the real world. This is also interesting uh, to read. Next is animal fantasy. If you have seen this animal fantasy, so you have animals and they can talk to each other. The animal can talk like human. So in the robotic world, you can say humanoid robot. So this is sort of humanoid animals. So the animal is behaves like human. Next is about toys and objects. So if you see Pinocchio, that is for one thing, Pinocchio is a toy. But on the other hand, Pinocchio is also as an object in the story. It was Pinocchio was a toy, was made by Geppetto, and then it's alive in the story. Winnie the Pooh is another. It's actually toys as well. Winnie the Pooh. In 1926, Winnie the Pooh has been already old. Almost 100 years. Pinocchio is older. And then Toy Story. If you see Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2, 3, 4, Toy Story, most of them are toys, but they talk. So the toys are talking to each other. You can also see that in modern fantasy, for example, like Toy Story, you cannot predict which one has good and which one has bad characters in the beginning. Although you can notice later in the story, you can notice later that one is good, one is bad. But in the modern fantasy, usually you can only see the bad and good always at the end of the story. While in the fairy tales, you can already notice the bad and the good characters. And then the tiny humans, as I mentioned earlier, Gulliver's Travel is a story about tiny, sometimes giant, and so on. So if you read this, I think you need some time, because it's a little thick book. But I should read this book when I was a student when I was an undergraduate and had to submit the summary of the books. So Gulliver's Travel, I suggest you to read this because it has messages inside. So it's better for you to read. Next is strange characters and situations. that is also good things for you to see. Strange characters, Pippi Longstocking is an example, and Mary Poppins. And then imaginary world, the world which is different from the world we live. Alice's Alice Adventures in Wonderland, published in 1865 and still enjoyed by children nowadays. This is a good example of modern fantasy. And then magical powers like Chocolate Touch, published in 1952. And historical fantasy, I noticed that Back to the Future was included last some time ago, was included in historical fantasy. Some experts or some scholars disagree with this um, kind of category, but this is true. In Back to the Future, you have Einstein back to life, and he designed machine, designed a car for the actor to drive. So if you have seen this story, if you've seen the movie, I think you could understand better. But this is also written as a book. Next is in short. I think I'd rather I'll finish very soon. Um, Modern fantasy takes children into imaginative worlds. First, it's about animals and dolls, and they can talk. So you can see that the humanoid animals, humanoid dolls. Um, so animals behave like people, and they can talk. But actually, the point is not the animal themselves, but the behavior, the attitude, the message behind the story. That is important. And then wizards cast their spells. This is the magical things that in the story. Next is aliens, beings live in a far distant galaxies. This is also interesting. If you see the movies like Power Rangers, for example, that is science fiction actually. But there is something which is hard to describe. If you can change, you can fly, and so you can move to another place very quickly. But this sort of magic, this sort of technology, make it very easy for the story, for your imagination to go just anywhere. And anyway, modern fantasy must meet the standards of all fine literature. So there is a standard actually for the story, the characterization, the theme, and so on. And it also must develop a point of view to encourage the reader to suspend disbelief. So you see in the Toy Story, for example, you see what happened next in the story, because it encouraged you to suspend disbelief. Um, Children's literature also create settings that allow the reader to see, to hear, and to feel the environment, which is different from the reality where we live. So we can go just anywhere. If you see the story, Treasure Island, for example, Treasure Island was not actually for children. Actually, in the beginning, Treasure Island was dedicated for people. I mean, for adults, young adults, because the story is not uh, not suitable for children. But children also read the book, so that is also a good idea to see. Um, um, Children's literature must present believable characters. So if you see the actors, the hero and the heroines, those are all believable characters. You believe that he or she can solve the problems that he or she faces. And the theme include some very important human values. So most of the children books have human values, but uh, we have to learn and learn about the human values, the values behind the story. That it is not easy for us to find out, but actually we have to, and then we can practice what message behind the story. So I suggest you to read more and more, read children books, and perhaps you can also find out the stories of Indonesian children's books, the Japanese children books, and other part of Indonesia. I think there are stories, and you can find out the value of the stories. And if you have a chance, you can also submit the Indonesian books written by Indonesian to the International Children's Digital Library, so that people from different part of the world can read the Indonesian children's literature, and they can learn the value of the Indonesian stories. I think that would be a good idea for you to start communicating with the people around the world by telling the stories of, from Indonesia and to other parts of the world, and that would be good, to share the ideas. Well, that is the points I'm going to talk about. I won't talk about any single books to discuss uh, for now, because this is maybe the first time for us to discuss about children's literature. We can discuss further about each stories, for example, in next meeting, for example, maybe. Depends on your boss. Your boss is Uli is your boss. Um, I think I will close my presentation by now, instead of finishing at 2:30. Can I? Yes. Thank you very much for listening. These are references I used just now. And thanks
Okay,
for
thank
listening. Okay, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Mas Ida. Okay, now moderator.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Ida. Now we came to the question and answer session. I will read some of the questions that have been asked. So the first question is from Gulam Falah. Can some children's literature be considered as a high literature in some degree? Then the next question is, wait, okay, it's from Mr. Daniel. Is children's literature still exists until now? Because the children's literature genre is already replaced with all age category. I think there's only two questions that I found through the presentation. Maybe Mr. Ida can answer the question.
Okay, thank you very much. First, I would like to tell you that, as I told you just now, that children's books are not always intended for children. Sometimes it is intended for adults. Um, but then the stories attracted children's, and then children's read and they enjoy the reading of the books, so it becomes children's books, because the definition of children's books uh, is, I mean, is so wide that it's not always about children and written by children or read by children and about children, but it is sometimes it can be adult books, but written, I mean, read by children, so it becomes children's books. Um, yes, it has sometimes the message is very high, And sometimes the message is not only for children but also for human life. For example, in the Mark Twain stories, they are the characters are children, like Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, and for example. The stories are actually have a very deep understanding about the life there, about the attitude of people to the black people there, and then also, but it has also fun of it, how somebody cheated, how somebody cheats another child in the story. That's also interesting to note, So the value of literature lies in the message behind, but this is important for us to find out as scholars. Um, Another thing is that in Indonesia we have a little bit problem with children's literature because now we have lots of movies and stories from overseas that have less values actually. Power Rangers, for example, is an example of not much appreciated as high value, but they are available in Indonesia, for example. This is an example that we have so many movies with poor value because they are cheap, cheap to buy, and then they can have very many audience. That's the problem. And then we have lots of stories from overseas, so we lose our stories. Actually, children's literature in other countries, I think they're still available. Even the children's literature is actually now become a department of children's literature. But we miss this, because children now read adults in Indonesia, like drama. You see drama Korea, like Uli enjoy very much, one day 25 hours, not only 24 but 25 hours watching drama Korea. That's Uli's behavior. Um, so this is the problem we face, that we have so many stories from overseas coming to Indonesia, so we lose we lose our own stories, and that you have to be aware. Wayang, for example, still enjoyed by Americans. Gamelan in Russia, enjoyed by Russian. They play gamelan in Moscow, for example. We not many enjoy gamelan nowadays here in Indonesia. So children's literature still exists overseas, and for example, in the UK, in the United Kingdom, those publishers that publish children books, they are supported by the government. They are supported 30% of the production cost, so that they can sell children's books affordable by the people there. In Indonesia, children's books are very expensive, but the stories are not from Indonesia, but from overseas. That is a problem we face nowadays. So, if you ask, children's literature still exists actually, and we have to revive. We have to revive the stories of the original Indonesian stories written for children, about children, read by children. We lose our literature, children's literature. We don't have much because I don't know what happens, but it seems we go back to the industrial revolution where children are expected to be adults very soon. So instead of reading children's stories. They read adult books, singing adult songs instead of singing children's song. We don't have much children's song nowadays, but we children sing adult songs. That is another thing that we have to be aware of. So if you grow older, if you marry, and you have children, try to find children books read and you tell the stories to your son and daughters. That is very important. And also the role of a father at home. Fathers should be able to tell stories. That's important. In the because mother has a role to develop children's heart, but father should be a role should have a role in developing their knowledge, also developing their attitudes as well. So the role of a father to be a storyteller, to read together, that is also good. I experienced that before. That's important in our family life. Thank you.
Okay, so there's another questions from Gabriel Aunila. Can mythology stories like Egyptian, Greek mythology be one of the children's story? If possible, is it good for the children? Will their belief in mythology affect their education and faith? Also, there's another question from YouTube. It's from Muhammad Arfansyah. Is manga or anime same like kid book because there's called Shonen Jump? It means for boy comics. Okay, that's all. Oh, I'm sorry. There's another question from Shafwatullah Mushafi. What can we do to protect children literature from the essence of LGBT that growing over in the Western? Maybe Mr. Ida can answer it now.
The first question I missed the first question. Can you repeat the question?
Okay. Can mythology stories like Egyptian, Greek mythology be one of the children's stories? If possible, is it good for the children? Will their belief in mythology affect their education and faith?
Okay, thank you. Mythology, if it is designed as a story, it can be children's books. If it is designed as a story, because modern fantasy, for example, has the elements of magician and then magic, also the a story of the past life that you can include, yet that you can see in the story. So the revival of the old tales, old happenings can be inside in the story as well. Only we have to be we lack of people who can review children's books in Indonesia. So what sort of books should be for children and so on. We also lack of publishers actually. Manga is considered as children's books as well. The problem in Indonesia is that comic is not considered as educational media. That's the problem. My understanding, because I'm the reviewer of comic in the United States, so I always see that the comics in the United States are very educational. It has a good impact for children. They can learn all things. They can learn the life of a cat, for example, how cat lives, how dinosaurs extinct, and so on from the comics. So manga is only an example of this is the Japanese word, but actually this is also part of the children's literature. Only who can review the publication in Indonesia, that is very important. we sometimes lack of this reviewer. We only have what you call the bedah buku. In Indonesia, we have bedah buku, but only few books to be bedah. You know. That's the problem. We never discuss about children's books. So I think this is time for the department, the English department of Fakultas Adab at UIN Suka to start with how to review children's books or how to review books. I think this will be a very good lesson for the students here. If you are a student of English department, you can also become a comics review or book review and so on. My experience shows that you can learn this. You can also become the illustrator of books. Yeah, in Indonesia, people are not aware of the rise of, for example, LGBT. You mentioned about LGBT. These are not. I mean, people are not aware of this. What happened in this at this time? So we need reviewers, and we have to develop criteria, categories of good books, and what aspects that appear in books, whether it has not very good impact for children. That is also good to think about, to consider. Go back to the movie, for example. Uh, I don't see the cruel fighting, for example, of the actors in children's movies overseas, for example, in the UK, in Poland, and Sweden. When I live in Sweden, I found children's stories are very always something good, always good things. They always have good things. In Indonesia, we have stories in which the characters they fight each other. They show fighting in the story, especially the movie, because now children we consider the generation Alpha. Gen Alpha is now the generation which are more visual instead of textual. My age is textual. Uli's age is textual, but you and the younger generation, like Gen Alpha, Generation Alpha were born starting in 2010. So they are young, but they are more visual, and this is very important for us. So think about any visual um, aspects, the bad visual aspects that we have to consider and to ban if necessary, so that they won't affect our children. uh, I think this is important for us to start thinking about how to protect our children. But we need more reviewers. We need to discuss about the what categories, what aspect, what are the influence, what impact of those movies, those comics, the poems, yeah, poetry, even drama, and so on, even books. So we have to consider a lot of things there. Thank you.
Okay, so we have another question. It's from Faringatun Daroja. What do you think about stories that show violence? Because sometimes the good character have to show violence to beat the evil. Maybe only that for now. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, violence happens in stories like Treasure Island, for example. Treasure Island is also on the movie actually. Treasure Island has violence in the story, but they're enjoyed by children. But I think this is not very good for those underage. You cannot tell the stories to underage. Maybe young adult can read that. So the best thing is we categorize which movie, which books have good uh, stories, no violence, for example, that is for children underage or um, like students of basic school, elementary school, middle schools. Yeah. I think those are good, but I noticed that now we have less people read children's books. Um, not many books are read. They prefer adults, and maybe because we have also the what you call A literacy. A literacy means you can read, but you don't want to read. You prefer reading WhatsApp, the story in WhatsApp, and social media instead of reading stories. And this is what happened in Indonesia. So violence is can exist in children's books, but I think we have to be aware of because actually sometimes children's stories. The stories are not dedicated for children, but children also read. So finally it becomes children's books. Yeah, as I told you, an example is the Treasure Island. Treasure Island has violence inside in it, but it's still okay. It's still acceptable as young adult books. Thank you.
Okay, so I think there's no further question. Oh, Rina is raising her hand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hello Pak Ida. I'm Rina from Jakarta, and I have two questions. The first one is about the development of children literature in Indonesia. What do you think about the fantasy in most of the children's literature in Indonesia? And then, if you want to know the development of children's literature in Indonesia, maybe you could suggest in what era or starting in which era or year that we can see the starting year or the starting point where we want to see the development of the children's literature in Indonesia. And the second one is about the fantasies. Why they always involve magic to create a fantasy in children's literature. Why most literatures, especially abroad, foreign literatures, they use the magic to create the fantasies for children's. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't read children's literature in Indonesia, but I think this is a challenge, for us to discuss about Indonesian children's literature. First, about the problem of children's literature in Indonesia is that um, children's literature or children's books are not designed to be enjoyed uh, read. Not so nice to read because we don't have illustrators. So most of the books are written more textual. So this is the problem with our children's literature because we don't have the visualization of the stories. I think this is good for us to start considering developing our our stories by designing the media. For example, by changing the stories with illustration and media like pop-up books or 3D books, and then also just any type of picture books, pop-up books, and so on. this will have a good impact to read, because if we only have text, text is not enjoyed anymore by the new generation. If you go to the library of, the school libraries, or go to the just any libraries, public libraries, well, they don't have Indonesian books designed as designed for young generation, the current generation. They are designed in the old design, mostly text. That is not very good. So I think it is good for us for publishers, especially for publishers, to redesign the stories and make it enjoyable to read by the children nowadays. Because nowadays we already moved to the digital things, and children now goes online most of the time. So that is not very good for us, because we don't have any rule for children. In the United States, it has no problem with online, because only those 13 years or beyond, they can have SIM card. But here, everyone can has a SIM card, even you are a very young child. So another problem is the publisher. Publishing children's books are expensive in Indonesia, so you have to consider how, like in the UK, uh, those publishers publishing children's books, they get support from the government if they want to publish books, interesting books, colorful books. They get help from the government. Um, Also, the children books. I mean, the children books in Indonesia are not developed so well. But if we can see, how we can start with the organizing children books. I think not a very long time ago, but we can start with the fairy tales, dated back to the 19th or 18th centuries, and then yeah, stories before 2000, the year of 2000, they are also good to revive. I think we have lots of stories, especially related to our cultural heritage. Only the problem is because we don't develop our stories into visually enjoyable. That is the point. And then magic. Well, um, if, in the modern fantasy, you have magic. Magic is a way of the, the author to free the imagination of the reader to go as far as the readers can. So, beside magic, you also have other elements. So, for example, in science fiction, you can go to the different part of the world, different world. That is also possible. So, magic is one of the way that you can free yourself from the reality in life. So, you can do anything using magic. For example, in the story of Baling Baling Bambu, children's movie, you can imagine that by using Baling Baling Bambu, you can go anywhere. That is another way of, but not magic. But magic is only an example. One way of making the readers go beyond their imagination. So there are other ways as well. Thank you.
Okay, I think there are no further questions from the participants. Thank you for Mr. Ida. So it is really important for us to learn about children's literature, even though it is a blur genre, but it is good and have a value in literature, and it can be used as further research. Yeah, I think that is all from me, and I'm really sorry if there is so much mistake from me. And thank you for Mr. Ida that already gave us a really amazing presentation. Now I will give the time back to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you, Miss Sita.
Thank you, Mr. Ida Fajar Priyanto, for your informative presentation. That's a really interesting topic. Well, before this public lecture is closed, let's hear the closing speech by the Chair of Committee, Dr. Daniel Hidayatullah M. Hum. For Mr. Daniel Hidayatullah, the time is yours.
Pak Daniel is here, Diva? Is Pak Daniel here? Pak Daniel di sini nggak?
I think he's not in Zoom.
Yeah, you can invite him because the Zoom is limited.
Okay.
I think we still have 79 participants, so maybe you can invite Pak Daniel to come. While we are waiting for Pak Daniel, I'd like to say something in Indonesian. Makasih ya Mas Ida ya, sudah membantu untuk membuka wacana tentang children literature. Memang di sastra Inggris ini Mas Ida, ini kita belum spesifik mempelajari children literature. Jadi masih lebih ke teori kajian fiksi secara luas ya untuk yang prosa ya. Jadi ini masukan juga yang baik dari Mas Ida, dari Pak Ida, karena tentu saja beliau ini sangat expert di bidang children literature ya. S2 beliau untuk salah satu tesisnya juga tentang children literature. Nah, semoga nanti Pak Ida juga tidak bosan untuk menambahkan bagaimana nanti ada satu sesi membahas tentang how to review komik, how to review book of children literature di sesi selain ini ya, sesi selanjutnya lebih spesifik, mungkin pelatihan juga ke mahasiswa yang berminat untuk mereview komik itu seperti apa. Ini juga jadi salah satu potensi kita juga nantinya untuk pengembangan profesi para alumni nantinya atau lulusan sastra Inggris Pak Ida bisa mengikuti jejak Pak Ida nih nanti sebagai comic reviewer ya di luar negeri gitu. Ya, sudah diundang Pak Daniel, Miss Diva.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah. To be a reviewer in the United States, you can get one comic. You can get up to $300 for one comic, and you can finish in a day. You can in a day, and one day, maybe 10 hours reviewing comic. You can get $300 for one comics. That's nice, If you have 30 comics or even 10 comics in 1 month, you already have $3,000.
Yeah. Wow.
$3,000 means 45 million.
Wow.
Only 10 comics.
That's
that's enough, food for life.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great. We need to learn from
This is
Pak Ida.
online usually online. You can work anywhere doing review comics, for example. I managed to do review comics usually in a day, 10 hours or 12 hours, and I usually get $300 for one comic.
Wow.
300 is not big, only maybe 5 million rupiah for one day.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. we have Pak Daniel here, Pak Ida. Yeah. On this occasion, I call Pak Ida. I usually call Mas Ida as my brother. Okay, Mas Dan, now time is yours to give not only closing, but maybe you can give any feedbacks or comments on the children's literature here, especially the books that you have read when you when you were a child. What kind of books you have read, Pak Daniel, before you close? Thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah, Waalaikumsalam, Mas Daniel. Yeah.
How are you all? Salam kenal, Pak Ida. It's very interesting and important lecture, yeah, for all of us. I was listening or watching the lecturer from YouTube because I could not join in the Zoom room. So, but anyway, it's very interesting as well as very important. Yeah. In our department, actually, we do not have any class for children literature because children literature category is, you know, in our opinion, is mixed with the adult literature. So we do not specify that category in our material, yeah, and our knowledge. So yes, I think it is very important for the students. So maybe in the next in their graduating paper project, yeah, they could involve this children literature and make this children literature into a prominent place, yeah, into their own place, so that we can you know, we can get used to with these terms, with this concept, yeah. And yes, I think I will address what Bu Uli said about my children literature, because in my childhood we usually, you know, like read our kind of children literature. You know, the comic book like Siksan Raka, yeah, Pak Ida. So the easiest book to find when we are child, yeah, it's much more easier to find that those kind of books compared to, like for example, Bubu or Lima Sekawan or Tintin, yeah. It's and you know, the content of such book is not only violent but also gore, full of, you know, the darkest fantasies of human can imagine. You know, the 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 descriptions and also the pictures of, you know, of hells that, you know, open to the children. So I think it also makes us in some way, gives us some trauma to as a children, yeah. So nowadays children is maybe more, I don't know, maybe more lucky with the various media that they can choose, so that they will not exposed to that kind of materials. But in my childhood, we have no options, you know, to read, yeah, because at the time, like for example, I can only borrow the Bobo magazine, something like that, yeah. So yes, I think that's our discussion, my discussion with Bu Uliati, yeah, that my childhood or our childhood children literature is not as as good as we, like American or European. That's the examples. I think that's all my comment on that. Maybe Pak Ida can respond a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay, Pak Ida, maybe you can give some comments or feed of Pak Daniel's information, and this is just one of example of. Have you read Pak Ida?
Nightmare. Yes, that's nightmare. I think that's more than nightmare. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. That's scary. I have a lot of children books. Usually we buy anywhere in Singapore or in the UK, in the US. We buy books and then we collect the books and then keep it. Even my son, second son now, he just finished reading War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. 1400 pages. 1400 pages read in a week. I said I challenge him. I finished reading War and Peace. 1400 pages in a week. Can you? And then he said I could, and then he finished in a week as well, And now he reads more and more books, read books. But in when they were young, they usually read children books. So I have lots of books, various books from the cloth book made of cloth, kain, made of cloth and busa. So that is for children at the age of 2 or 3. They have different types of media, and then wordless picture book, and then picture books, and then we have pop-up books, and so any kind of books. I bought those kind of books, and then they enjoy reading. And so I usually buy books which are colorful, and then they can practice reading, and then they can also besides practicing reading, they can also be doing something on books, and then read aloud, they read aloud as well, so and in English, because when they were young, we had the British living with us, British young people living with us at home. So we mostly practice English at home. We speak English most of the time up to now. So that's why my sons are influenced by English books. So but we feel so sorry that we lack of Indonesian stories like Neraka. So you mentioned just now. We didn't read that, unfortunately. But we do hope that we have lots of children's literature in Indonesian. Actually, if they can be republished in different media, that would be of use. I mean, more and more young people will be able to read and enjoy the books if they are designed in different way of publication instead of just text. Because text is no longer enjoyed by young people. They want to have pictures. So this book has lots of pictures. So I usually have books with pictures inside. So most of our books for my sons all are picture books. So if we can design children's books in Indonesian, and we have good illustrator, right? I think we have good illustrators. Only the problem is we don't publish children books a lot in Indonesia. So, and also the price is still expensive. And then the coming of the foreign books, either translated or in English. We have that, so that cause cause children have the influence of foreign culture. Although globalization is I mean exists and happens, but we lack of our understanding of our own culture. That's the problem we face nowadays. Thank you.
Yeah, I can add Pak Daniel and Pak Ida, maybe why we read that such books, nightmare books. Maybe this is because of our regime at the time, and our nations at the time was influenced or was colored up by political situation at the time, right? So that is why the our backgrounds of reading at the time mix and different from teenagers or children's right now, Pak Ida. What do you think, Pak Dan and Pak Ida?
I don't think so. No, because the problem nowadays is children stop. I mean, the literature are not well studied, not well studied. That's the point. Those studying literature, not many. I mean, not many. And reading, I think in Bahasa Indonesia class, they don't read novels a lot, you know. So that is the problem why Indonesian literature are not so well read by formally. Informally, yes, people read, of course. You know. But if this can be done at schools and in the university, that would be of importance, you know, because people can then doing reviews, for example. I think that is the point.
Okay, maybe Pak Daniel, you can end up or do a closings for this session. Is a great discussion actually. Yeah, we need more sessions. Yeah, hopefully in the future. Yeah.
Yes.
Time is
Okay,
yours,
thank
Pak
you.
Dan.
I would like to say thank you very much for Pak Ida, and then for Bu Uli as the head of department and all the committee. It's been a awesome lecture, and I hope in the future we can arrange another meeting to discuss more about children literature, and also I think this is a very good starting point for us in this department to start discussing the children literature, especially in the novel review. Yeah, in the Bu Uli's class, I think it's a good opportunity and good starting point. And I hope all the participants can get the benefit of this lecture. And thank you all once again, and have a great day. Terima kasih Bu Uli, terima kasih Pak Ida.
Ya, sebelumnya kamera on dulu semuanya ya. Monggo silakan kamera on semua dulu agar bisa di screenshot oleh moderator atau MC-nya ya. Pak Dan, monggo Pak Dan dan Sita, Miss Sita. Okay, Diva, can you do a screenshots here? Page 1. Or Sita, can you
Yes.
shoot the screen here?
Yes, ma'am. For all the
Okay.
participants, please turn on
Yeah.
your camera because
And
I
so
will...
including Pak Daniel together with Sita.
Oh, kelihatan.
Yeah, 1, 2,
1, 2,
3.
3. Yes, enough.
Okay, where is Pak Daniel? Not
Pak
here.
Daniel is on Amartya screen, ma'am.
Oh, yes. Okay. The next. Already?
So this is the second page. The second
Yeah.
page.
Diani, Audrey, Yusril, Indra, please camera on.
I ask for all the participants to turn
Put
on
the camera on. Indra, Alifa, put the camera on. Novelia,
Yusril,
Bella,
Yusril, Resti,
okay.
so the third page, Nabila,
Next,
Resti, Eko, Alifa,
finish.
finish.
The last.
Okay, the last. So that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can turn off your camera.
Okay. Once again,
Okay.
thank you, Pak Ida.
Thank you, Pak Ida.
Thank you very much for inviting
Yeah.
me.
Okay, Sita, you can close now.
Okay. Finally, we get to the last session in this event that is closing. Let's close this event by saying Hamdalah together. Alhamdulillah.
Makasih Pak
Okay.
Ida. See you soon. Ya, oke. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thanks to all the audience and all the participants entirely. I am a master of ceremony, retreat and apologize for any mistakes. Thank you and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.